fire service.
Another heck of a great guy. Yeah.
Terrific guy. Scared the daylights out of you. He had the roughest, toughest voice that you ever would want to hear, but the nicest guy with the biggest heart. He came down and looked at the area and says, there's a possibility of make, if you want to, make this a regional school. And in March 23rd of 1971, House Bill number 8033 was heard in Hartford, and there was not one bit of opposition to it, and the next legislature it was passed through as a regional fire training school, which meant that along with that recommendation won a $12,000 grant.
So you had a few lean years here.
Oh yeah.
I mean, quite a while. We're talking, what, 5, 6, 8 years when you were down here alone with whoever would help you.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It didn't have a fence around the place.
Oh,
it didn't have a security alarm.
Nothing.
Yeah,
No
nothing.
security. No nothing. I think the fire department did.
We cut the grass on Fridays.
Yeah, Friday's
Remember
a
that.
grass day.
Yeah.
We had a couple of break-ins, and then we talked Chief Stope into trying to get some kind of an alarm system in down here. It was, both times we had many windows broken, but both times that the building was actually broken into, there was very little damage done. One of the break-ins, were in the process of painting inside here, and there was 3-4 gallons of paint in one of the rooms, and they chose to take one of the cans of paint that was half full and throw it from this door in, just heaved it into the room. Luckily, it was latex, came up with a putty knife, a little water, and that was it. The second time the building was broken into, there was nothing of value in here yet. They came in the back window, not through where the office is, but the other window next to it, and went out the front door. Called the cops down. Cops come down. His partner is probably on the job 3 weeks, and the older guy is telling the newer man what to put down. And he said, when was the building checked last? He said, Friday about 4 o'clock. Tells the new guy to put down entry was made between Friday, whatever it is, 4 o'clock, Monday morning, 8 o'clock. I said, no, that's not right. What do you mean that's not right? I says, well, first of all, which way did they come in? Look at the footprints in this fresh snow. They came in the back, went over the fence, went in, broke the back window, came in, and they went out the front door. Look at the prints. Are they snowed in? What time did it stop snowing? I said, 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. So break-in time is between 4 o'clock Sunday and 8 o'clock Monday morning.
Days.
So, yeah, I guess you're right.
Well, you had some lean years. All of us, all of the people who were captains, about 25% of the lieutenants, the ones that have been on the department a long time, whenever you talk about training, the name that immediately comes to mind is Joe Elias. And if there was to be a second name that would come to anybody's mind, it would be Mike Kranick. Now, Mike was the first superintendent of apparatus, and I met Mike when he got transferred to ONES, I guess, probably 57, 58, sometime around there.
Yeah. He was actually the first training officer, or tried to be the first training officer, between duties of maintenance of the equipment. When they'd get new guys on, he would take them out, show them how to lay a line, how to climb the aerial, and that was the end of the training.
But he was assigned to the ladder truck also,
Yes.
so he was really doing 3 jobs.
3 jobs. When he working on the apparatus, if there was new guys that needed to be trained, he'd do the best he could on that. Alarm came in, everything stopped, and he was on the ladder truck, whether he was driving this week or riding. So they got their money's worth out of Mike.
What made you decide to get involved in the training of the people? Because you were a firefighter, and I remember barely you as a firefighter, but you were, the guy to go to if you needed any information on anything. And then you became a lieutenant, and of course you trained your crew, and your crew trained more than anybody, and you were a natural, of course, to become the training officer. But what prompted that in your early career?
I don't know if anything really that I knew I was being prompted to be the training officer. I was very good friends with Hans Lundgren.
Now, who was Hans?
Hans was the fire chief in Stratford, and his best friend was Dick Sylvia, who was the fire chief in Norotan. And hanging around with these guys, I got kind of interested in, wanted to learn more. How did pumps operate? Now, what happens when you do this? You open up this gauge, what happens? And being with them, it got me involved into the training association, Connecticut State Firemen's Instructors Association, and go to the meetings with these guys. If I was off on a Wednesday, I used to take a week's vacation to go to the fire schools, New Haven, Willimantic, and through working with Hans and Dick Sylvia and Andy Flanagan, I became an instructor of the group. And from there, the thing just snowballed.
It would be a safe assumption to say that fire training as we know it now in Fairfield County, let's say, or the lower portion of Connecticut, was shaped by the men that yourself, certainly Dick Sylvia and Hans and Andy Flanagan.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they were the principals. Another fella who I remember was Larry Ford. Now, I never really knew where he fit into the equation, but he was there somewhere on a state level.
Yeah, he was with the State Board of Education, and
but he was a firefighter
he
first.
was a firefighter first, and I really forgotten now what subjects he taught up at the fire school.
But he was very active.
He was very active.
Still is. I mean, you still see him at a lot of the meetings. Another heck of a nice guy. I mean, he goes way back with you and the others.
Yeah, with that first bunch that we mentioned earlier.
That did shape training. Some of the people you worked with on the Fairfield Fire Department, we've mentioned them briefly. Of course, Joe Stopa lived at 77 Lindley Drive, went from firefighter to chief. Very difficult thing to do. Managed it very well.
Very difficult, because from one day he's a firefighter and the next day he's the chief. And there was no in between. It was one step. And did one heck of a job. He was another guy that would never bawl you out in front of the rest of the guys or in front of one guy. He'd call you into his office and you knew you were having a problem, and the problem was straightened out to his satisfaction, and that was the end of it. The next 5 minutes later, you're sitting down having coffee with him.
Always wore his uniform,
Always wore his uniform.
neat as a pin,
Yep.
and like you said, fair, but very firm.
Yep.
That's how I remember. He was a good fellow to work for then, as you were, I don't know, you were a captain. You were a captain then when Stope died about 1975, I believe.
Yeah.
Yep. And Mike Kranick, we talked a little about Mike. Mike was a firefighter from Tewes. Got interested in maintaining the truck somehow?
Yeah, well, Mike originally was a auto mechanic, and along with his two brothers, and they're very active in the volunteers up at Tewes. And they had a 5 or 6 bay garage in back of their house on street girls, Greenfield Street. And one day the garage blew up, and that kind of got Mike into the deep thinking of trying to get on the fire department. Now, he wasn't one of the originals. He came on maybe 10 years after the originals. The originals started, I think it was 1927.
Do you know who the originals were?
No,
Okay, because you were badge number 7,
I was badge number
but
7.
Dave Russell Sr. had your badge
Yeah.
before you. Steve Toth, we've talked about, he was badge number 18, so he was an old timer or a late comer.
Aid was 11.
11, and his grandson wears that badge
Yeah.
now.
Uh,
Mike Marion, he was, him and
Yeah.
Big John were early.
yeah, it could have been Mike and Big John in the center.
I know they always used to have an argument who came on first and second because
Yeah,
one of them
one
started days and one started nights.
you
You
know.
know? Yeah, yep.
You always get
Yeah.
into that. I was there longer.
Yeah. But Mike, so Mike came out of the department, and he was an auto mechanic.
Yeah, and he maintained the 2 engines, 1 engine at Tewes until then they got the aerial, and he maintained that.
What did he have at Tewes before the aerial? Nothing, or another engine maybe?
I think it was a Model T Ford.
Wow. Who took care of the trucks at once?
They went out to private repair services.
Wow.
You never knew where it was going to go. You'd have an oil change, you had to bring your own oil. Could have done that right in the firehouse, because that old firehouse had a pit in it, repair pit, but
You know, one of the things I want to back up just a second, we talk about pit. You have the oil pits out here at the training center. And the environmental movement was certainly not as strong back in the 60s or 70s as it is now. How many hundreds of thousands of gallons of oil-contaminated water do you think we put into the salt marshes out here? Quite a few, huh?
maybe 1 or 2.
1 or 2, yeah. Well,
And then
statute of limitations is
we
with
had
us here.
then we put in some dry wells in there to separate it.
We'd all be in jail if they knew, wouldn't they? Yeah, but that was hypothetical, certainly not. Yeah, hypothetical, all right. Now, John Lazinski, we mentioned him, he lived on Blaine Street, I believe.
Yeah.
Had a big 53 Mercury, blue and white, with JHL was his license plate. And he was a dispatcher. I don't know, was he a firefighter?
He was a
Did
firefighter.
He worked the
first,
apparatus
yeah.
also?
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh. See, I
Because
don't
when there
remember
was
that.
2 men on the job, one was days and one was nights, and then they'd work a week and change. And it was him and Mike Marion.
Big John was something, wasn't he?
A very quiet guy. Pretty good fireman. As far as pump operator goes, he got your water.
That's
That'll cover it.
That-
How he got the water was a mystery.
Yeah. In his later days, he'd have a tonic or two. Sir-
Didn't he? I
Yeah.
really don't,
Things were a lot different then than now, though. But,
didn't realize that.
yeah. Yeah. I can remember he was very critical in a good way of everybody, you know?
Mm.
And you could walk in there and, like, if Dick Rutt would walk out of the room and I'd walk in, I would say to Big John, "What do you think of that Dick Ruat?" He'd go, "Boy, isn't he something?" Yeah, John was a joy. He really was. He was a joy to work with. I think John retired in 1966, just a year before I came on. Adrian Leahy lived at 111 Reef Road on the corner of Parkway. So Aid was always capable of taking the second piece out of ones.
At night, you could depend on it. Daytime was a different story. But at night, he was the main driver.
We never did find out what he meant. Aid always used to have a saying. He'd go, I mean, and we'd look at him and say, "Adrian, what do you mean?"
Yeah.
We never did find out what he meant.
Never found.
But I don't know what his history was with the fire department, how he got involved. He was a plumber, worked for Jacoby.
His father was a volunteer,
No kidding.
and he became a volunteer, and so did his brother. And his brother went on the police department, and Aid was on the fire department.
I didn't know he had a brother.
Stanley.
Wow. That's incredible. Now, of course, his grandson is on the department. Chet Garrett. Department. We've been discussing his 30-plus year career as a member of the department. Well, we talked about Joe Stope, Mike Kranick, Mike Marion, Big John, Adrian, Chet Garrison. Chet worked up in Greenfield Hill for a while, that I remember.
He went to Greenfield after he left the center. He was on, when he first went on the department, he was down in Engine 4 at Southport, and then was transferred to ones. And after many, many, many years, at ones, he was transferred up to Greenfield Hill.
So he was a fours guy. See, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Now, one night he was on duty at ones and something happened to his car?
If you can visualize, which is a very, very hard thing to do today, is the old ones, where the delicatessen is now, there's a fence line on the left-hand side as you face the building. And night shift would come in, the first guy would pull in at that alleyway. His car was all the way in. The second guy was second car in. Well, this one night, Chet was a little late getting in. The first car in, right at the sidewalk. And somehow, or some reason, they pinched a guy in the center for some reason or another. And after being down at the police station for a while, he asked whoever was on the desk if it would be all right to go up to Larry's Diner and get a cup of coffee and a burger. He said, "Sure, why not?" 5 o'clock in the morning, we get a call from New Haven Police Department. "Is there a Chet Garrison working there?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "This is New Haven Police Department. We just recovered his car." "What do you mean recovered it?" He says, "It was stolen." Holy mackerel, everybody ran out, checked their cars. Sure enough, his car wasn't there.
Go on.
It was gone. Got it up, went up the next morning to pick it up. It had a bullet hole in the back where the cop took a shot at the guy that was driving it.
Now, there was no Connecticut Turnpike or anything.
Oh,
then,
no,
right?
no.
So
Connecticut
it was
Turnpike.
a hump to get to New Haven.
Yeah, you went Post Road, through Devon, through Milford Center, through West Haven, all these.
How did the Connecticut Turnpike construction affect the fire department? as far as responding to the other side of the turnpike? Was that pretty extensive, or did they do
It
sections?
wasn't really a problem because they always had the road open for emergency vehicles. I do remember that one afternoon we had a roof fire on Sturgis Road, just above Umpqua Road. And Aerial 2, the old Aerial 2, which was built like a bulldozer, winds up at the fire scene, and they've got gravel on the running boards, up over the fenders, in the ladder bed. We went through, and after we went through, somebody with a bulldozer or a payloader dumped a heck of a pile of dirt right in the middle of Mill Plain Road. Well, they couldn't turn the aerial around, but so they decided they'd go through it.
Oh, man. Well, they moved a lot of houses.
Oh, yeah.
And did they tear a lot down too?
The ones that weren't bought up, yeah. The biggest problems, there were some changes of entrances to streets, and some streets that were through streets now became dead-end streets. At one time we did have a list of all the nearest hydrants to the turnpike. I don't know whether that list is still in existence or not.
We're working on it. Yeah, we have that, sure. Steve Toth, we talked a little about him. Badge number 18. You and he were shoveling snow out in front of the old place once. Had a mishap?
Yeah, well, one of us had to be a director and the other had to be the shoveler. And it seems Chet was sitting in on the switchboard, and we had such a pile of snow in front of on the corner of the driveway, of the ramp of the firehouse. You really couldn't see anything on the other side. I'm directed, and Steve was shoveling, and I said, "Okay," and he lit a shovel full of snow. Missed the pile completely, hit a car that was coming down Reef Road. Oh, what a crash that made, and scared the hell out of the guy, but he laughed it off. I ducked in the firehouse. I ain't gonna have no part of this.
Steve was also involved in an incident at the Grand Union fire, which was, again, long before you had a paid chief. Chief Carroll told him, don't let anybody inside the building?
Yeah, and that started to evolve into a snowball, but it was quieted down quite fast. You really couldn't blame Steve Toth. If there was some reason that they were laying for Steve Toth, and Carroll gave him an order not to let anybody else in, and this commissioner came up and said, wanted to go in, and Steve put his foot up against the door. He said, "You can't go in. So I'm Commissioner so-and-so." Steve says, "I don't care." Chief Carroll says, "Nobody else in." Well, he made a big stink about it.
It was in the papers and everything.
Oh, yeah. And what if they were laying for Steve? And he let him in.
Sure.
Just obeying an order, and he could have been in deep trouble. But he stuck to his boots, and Carroll backed him 100%.
Which we had talked about earlier.
Yeah.
That was great. John Murphy, my first captain. Big Red, we used to call him.
Big Red.
He had all the big fires. You and he used to travel quite a bit up to New Hampshire together.
Yeah.
You had places, what, about 10 miles apart from each other?
Yeah, just about.
Yeah.
It seems like all the big fires, Murphy had them for some reason. Easy going to a certain point when you pushed him or got him into a corner. Be careful. Because when he went like this with his finger to you,
I remember quite well. Yeah.
you knew you were in deep trouble. trouble.
it'd be that big, bright red color
Oh,
coming up, right?
Suddenly it'd be white, and then that red color would come up through his neck and his jaw and his cheeks.
Yeah.
I think the funniest thing that I can remember at an incident was the drowning up at Lake Mohegan, not Lake Mohegan, Sam Mortar. Rescue 15, which is part of Stratfield Engine 3 Company, which is strictly a volunteer outfit manned by their own truck and turned over to the town. They had about a 15, 18-foot aluminum boat, and they're out searching for this body. And there was our divers were also in the water. And they must have had 15 people in this aluminum boat. And the boat starts to sink. And Murph's on the shore hollering at Lieutenant Coughlin, who's standing up like George Washington with the portable up in the air. And he said, "You better not get that radio wet."
I enjoyed working for Murphy. I was the recipient of a few of his gatherings that he had, come here when I talk to you. But I was also privileged enough to go up to New Hampshire with you and Murph, and like you said, both of you would give a guy hell, get everything all straightened out, and then it would be like nothing ever happened. Now I got there's 4 other names here, and I don't know if there's any story associated with these guys, but they're almost like lost in history. We had fellows on the department, Bob Jones, retired early, Gene Brzezinski, retired early, Dennis Sullivan, he was a lieutenant, and he quit, and then John Smith. Johnny worked with you. I think you and he got caught in a backdraft or a flashover or something.
Yeah. We had the misfortune of getting caught in a backdraft. I was also caught in one with Chet Garrison, and as the years went by, Chet's hearing got very, very bad, and I think it was due to that backdraft explosion. We were on the second floor of a Cape Cod, and the next thing we were out on the sidewalk.
Wow.
Charlie Phillip was very, very lucky on that fire also. He was standing up halfway up the stairs, and he could feel the buildup of heat, so he jumped. Well, he didn't jump fast enough because I passed him going out the front door.
Now, no breathing apparatus here?
The only breathing apparatus, again, were the
canister masks?
The canister filter type mask.
Canvas coats?
Canvas.
Rubber boots?
Rubber, I think we had.
Hypalon?
Yeah, I guess we had canvas coats. There was a big changeover from rubber coats to the canvas.
And with the green wool liners that would turn your arms green?
Turn your arms green, your shirt green.
Now, I also wrote Jim Mercurio because back in the early days, of course, and during the war, when there'd be a fire, we still rely on the volunteers quite a bit, but they were primary. You and Jim raced to the firehouse to take one of the trucks to a fire. And there's a little mishap, maybe?
Yeah, as we said earlier, there was a mutual understanding. The first guy into the firehouse would drive the second truck. And I had a longer ways to run. I would run down from First National, which is up where I guess there's a jewelry store, the golf store, and the Fresh from the Farm store.
Right next to Sam Goody's toward Reef Road.
Yeah,
okay.
Right opposite Larry's Diner. So I had a little bit farther to run than Jimmy. Jimmy was down farther, across the street.
He was older, though, and you were faster.
He was older, I was a little faster. But there was many times that it was a tie, and he was more proficient than I am at the time, and he would drive. But this one time, he opened the door and I ran in, which meant that I was first one into the station, and got the call and pulled out, and there was this crash, and he pulled the overhead door down a little bit too fast and took the hose loading lights out. There was one particular time I'm running down from the First National, and old Clampett's drugstore was on the corner where Fairfield store is, and the front door set back on an angle. It didn't come out square. It set back on an angle, and there's a big lolly column holding the second floor up. And Jimmy, it's a tie between Jimmy and I. And for some unknown reason, I was very lucky I didn't break my full neck. Jimmy ran to the outside of this post. I cut between the post and the door of the pharmacy when the guy comes out reading the newspaper. Never saw him. Never saw the newspaper. Never saw the iron fence on the end of the sidewalk, which I went over like a broad jump. That was one of the times I lost out. But Jimmy was very good. When we used to burn the grass down through the swamp area. It was probably a 3-weekend job. He was the chef. And he made the most delicious hot dogs and sauerkraut that you ever wanted to taste. And then about an hour later, wonder why your lips were burning. Very good fireman, good truck driver.
Well, there's one other guy who worked for Jim Mercurio, the last fellow I want you to talk about, George Gabicki. He was the head vegetable man, I guess.
Yeah.
But you told us a story, it had to be 30 years ago, that involved the peanut machine. They had one of those, you put a nickel into the slot, you turn the knob, and you'd get a handful of peanuts.
The
This is the old firehouse now.
up in the old firehouse, we had a couple of gumball machine and peanut machine, and for some reason that area wasn't lit very well. The alarm room was right through the doorway from there. That had the lighting. And one day, one evening, George is eating peanuts, one handful after another. And came around the corner and threw the light on, and his whole hand and his arm were covered with red ants. Oh! You want to see him make a beeline for the bathroom, because he hugged the bowl for a while.
Oh, that has to be
Oh,
awful.
that was awful.
The last thing, history gets lost. And I want to put our collective minds together for a second and see if we can recall, even so, if it's ever so slightly, some of the fatal fires we had in Fairfield. Now, recently this year, or within the past 12 months, we had a fire in Gray Street where we had a fatality. Before that, we had a fatality on Deepwood Road. You and I had talked about that earlier today in the car. Then we had a young boy die on Oakwood Drive, I believe it is. That was about 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. I think you and I had a call on Hurd Street, single-story building, right around the curve on Hurd, in the back.
Back there, yeah.
That had to be 30 years ago. We had a fatal there.
Yeah.
The day Chief Stopa died, we also had a fatal fire on Penburn Drive.
Penburn Drive.
A fellow who worked for the Bridgeport Post, who was a
Yeah.
sports writer. Going way back and probably skipping a few fatalities, on Bronson Road, just as you go over the railroad bridge and you take a right toward the...
Right, the first right on, first house on the right. Keechie used to work for the town of Fairfield. His mother and sister died in that fire. They had portable kerosene heaters, which was the cause of that. That was a bad wintry night. They had to dig for the hydrant because it was covered with snow.
And Morehouse Lane, we lost a guy there, but I think he was sleeping in a
He
shed
was
or.
sleeping in a shed or a
Yeah.
barn up there.
I don't remember any others, and I might have missed.
Wasn't it Bobby Jones's mother, sister, or something on Meadowbrook Road across from the old?
Oh, yeah, across from.
McKesson's old.
That's right. That was.
Where Home Depot is, there was a fatal fire in